Thanks a lot for spending time with us today. A few days ago, we reached a major milestone in the history of Peptinov when the first patient with knee osteoarthritis in our clinical trial was injected. And looking back at our progress in the past few years, I thought that maybe it could be of interest for people in my network to discover what a small company, we are only a 10 people team, is doing to try and provide a cure to a disease affecting 250 million people in the world and with no cure today. And doing so using the immune system itself rather than an external drug. So I admit as well that I was curious to see if people in my network who have known primarily for my years in the air transport industry would respond to the invitation. And I'm happy to see that, as I said before, there are about 100 people who have decided to join or either conferences. There is another one tonight in French. So together with me, now that I have become a biotech evangelist, is Hervé, our CFO and the head of business development. And together we'll be giving a presentation on the Peptinov, on what we do and how the treatment is meant to be working. I'll be assisted as well for questions. We'll take any questions at the end of the call by Antoine and Maël from Happy Capital. But you can raise your questions during the call. So there is an icon at the bottom left, a chat icon where you can mention any question that you would like to ask us. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation, starting with Peptinov in brief. So it's a biotech that was created 10 years ago and is based in a hospital in Paris, Cochin Hospital, which is well known for rheumatology and also for clinical trials in the vaccine areas. So it's a good place for the type of therapy that we are in. What we are is we are experts in what is called active immunotherapy against self-proteins. And let me explain. There are a number of diseases which are caused by the excess of our own proteins. For instance, when we become older, then you have a dysregulation that increases the amount of these self-proteins. And active immunotherapy is the ability to induce our own body, our immune system, to produce its defense against our own proteins when they are in excess. So that's the philosophy. We are a team of 10 people. And what characterizes us is we have a variety of backgrounds. We are coming from various sectors, pharmaceutical, biotech, air transport, in my case. But most importantly, we have different business and scientific skills like bioinformatics, vaccine developments, clinical trial developments, immunotherapy. So that variety is really a strength of ours. I let you read these few numbers in connection with Peptinov. The point to note is, so we have about 5 million in equity, and about half of that amount was raised in the past 2 years. We are also benefiting from the support of France's largest innovation fund, called BPI, Banque Publique d'Investissement, who are helping in particular with grants and interest-free loans. Let's now speak about osteoarthritis. So we are in phase 1, and that is a major milestone for any biotech to have accomplished that move from animal to humans. So by the time we reach 80, the 80% of us, unfortunately, will suffer from osteoarthritis. It's a progressive disease that eats away at the cartilage in our joints. And there are hundreds of million people suffering today. There is no cure, only treatments against pain, what is called symptomatic treatments. And it's a huge economic cost. not only to healthcare systems, but also to corporations, to enterprises in terms of lost work days. And the good thing is it's now known, it's a recent knowledge, that behind osteoarthritis, there is, in 70% of the cases at least, chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation upheld by the excess of a protein called interleukin-6 or IL-6. And a few words on inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing when it's to defend yourself immediately against a wound, an injury, or a virus. But it's a bad thing when it is chronic, when there is not a clearly defined cause. It can be stress, it can be aging, overweight, and then you have a chronic inflammation which continues. And it's seen again that at least in 70% of osteoarthritis cases, there is chronic inflammation at the start of the process before the cartilage is destroyed. So in Peptinov, we have put together our anti-IL-6 immunotherapy. The idea is to target the inflammation, and by bringing the inflammation to a stop using the own defense system of the patient, then we would stop the disease progression, that is cartilage destruction. And doing so, given the number of patients, that would be a huge market to open up as well. How do we do that? So the issue is the following. Normally your immune system will only defend itself against something that is regarded as an external agent, not against your own proteins. So what we do is we have two components in our product. The first one is a small part of the target protein, of the IL-6 protein. It's called a peptide, hence the name Peptinov of the company. So then we combine this peptide with another protein called a carrier protein. I won't say much about it, except for the fact that it is regarded by the immune system as an external agent. So when you combine the two, you have Peptinov's anti-IL-6 product, which has two characteristics. Number one, it mimics part of the IL-6 protein. And secondly, it is regarded as external by the immune system. So let's see in practice what that means. Let's take a patient with inflammation in the knee, but that could work actually against other types of inflammation, not only the ones in the knee, hence the orange bit. And let's inject the anti-IL-6 product of Peptinov, which is exactly what we are doing right now as part of the clinical trial. So in response to that injection, the body, seeing the external component of the product, will react by producing antibodies. But because the injected product, seen as the enemy, resembles the IL-6 protein, then the same antibodies will also neutralize the IL-6 in excess, which is in the bloodstream. So that's the idea. So we've created a product that can neutralize IL-6. So there are advantages. Easy to use in the sense that only 2 to 3 injections per year subcutaneous are sufficient to have enough antibodies in your body for so long as the inflammation continues. Then, because the antibodies are endogenous, meaning they are from your own body, then you don't have problems of resistance against the treatment over time. You can continue injecting the external product. And the production costs are very, very low compared to what are called biotherapies. We are talking of a factor of at least 20 in terms of production costs, less than conventional treatments. So a few figures about the market. I said it before, 250 million people suffer from osteoarthritis, and that market is on the increase because of aging and because of obesity, which is on the increase as well. If we only look at the 70% with inflammation, that's our total market potential, 175 million patients. And if we restrict ourselves to knee osteoarthritis patients, we do so because of it's easy to select patients which have that as part of clinical trials. then that's almost 90 million people, of which we could look at the initial markets for a pharmaceutical company. The initial markets typically include the EU, the US, Canada, and Japan, and that's 12 million people. And these numbers do not include the other diseases which are caused by the excess of IL-6, or where you can find excess of IL-6, such as chronic inflammatory diseases, long-lasting pain, aging diseases as well, many aging diseases, hence the expression inflammaging, which you can see from time to time. Depression as well. You have depression and excess of IL-6 together. For instance, at COVID, it is seen that patients which have been affected by the disease, even after they are supposed to be to have recovered, often have a chronic fatigue and a depressive status, which seems to be related to the excess of IL-6. And then there are certain cancers as well. So let's speak about how we compare to other types of treatments in osteoarthritis. So in this graph, we are considering two dimensions: costs, production costs to be precise, and then the type of treatment. Is it a treatment which only deals with symptoms on the left, or is it really a curative? And so the first category we are looking at are painkillers, the likes of paracetamol, corticoids, or opioids. And if you compare Peptinov to these, then our aim is to address a root cause and not just a simple symptom. The other thing is, because the antibodies in Peptinov's case are endogenous, then it's usable over a sustained period, which is clearly not the case for a number of painkillers. The second category we would mention is there are existing anti-IL-6 treatments, but they are not from endogenous antibodies. They are external. They are very expensive. They are called monoclonal antibodies. And because they are very strong, they have side effects as well. So they are used there and are very efficient in very severe rheumatoid arthritis and diseases like that, but they are not appropriate to slowly evolving diseases such as osteoarthritis, for which the side effects would not, and the costs of an ongoing therapy like monoclonal antibodies would not be bearable by the healthcare systems. So there are benefits against these. I would mention one final thing is you will probably think that there are treatments in development against osteoarthritis, and you are right. So there are other companies like us who are trying to come with innovative treatments. I would say that their approach tends to focus on how to reconstitute the damaged cartilage as opposed to acting to stop inflammation, which is our approach. So in that sense, you could say that the two approaches are complementary. Peptinov for the early stages, and cell therapies more for the late stages of the disease before you need to go through knee surgery. To finish, in summary, so we have moved from animal testing to humans. In animal, we've gone to mice, rabbits, and monkeys, and we were able, in all cases, to generate good levels of anti-IL-6 antibodies. And also, we've seen that the product was well tolerated, in particular in monkeys, which happen to have the same IL-6 peptide formula as humans. There 100% of the immunized monkeys have generated antibodies and didn't have any side effects. So that was before 2021. And then in 2021, we are now proceeding with our phase 1 clinical trials. It is in knee osteoarthritis patients. It's just starting, and it's a double-blind trial against placebo, meaning that neither the patient nor the doctor knows whether he has received the treatment or a placebo. So it will last for 16 months. I think now it's time that I let our CFO Hervé say a few words.
Thank you, René. So as you can see on this slide, we present the development plan of Peptinov. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the biotech development stages, this is quite typical for a biotech like us. So as René said, we only recently finished the preclinical stage, and we got very interesting results, which allowed us to move to humans. And so we recently started the clinical phase 1, as René said, and this clinical phase 1 is going to last until about mid-2022. And the goal of this phase 1 is to assess the safety of our anti-IL-6 product in knee osteoarthritis patients. So that's the main endpoint of the phase 1. But we will also assess the level of anti-IL-6 response that we will induce in those patients. So we will proceed with 24 patients. 18 patients will receive the treatment, and 6 patients will receive a placebo. And as we got very good results in animals, we expect to succeed in this phase 1 and have a good tolerance in patients. And following that, we will proceed with a phase 2 clinical trial. And the goal of that trial is to assess the dose of the product, and also the first signs of efficacy in order to obtain a proof of concept in humans. And the goal of Peptinov is to develop a product up to the clinical phase 2, up to a successful clinical phase 2, and then to get an out licensing deal with a pharmaceutical industrial partner. And usually that's how it's done in the biotech development. And this pharmaceutical partner is going to proceed with the next phases of development, clinical phase 3, market approval, and then sales, of course.
Hervé, maybe I'll add one quick point, and it's shown on the slide, is that we may, if we raise enough money, proceed with multiple phase 2 trials. So with a single phase 1, we can do more than one phase 2, as long as you have a successful phase 1. And that this phase 2 would be again knee osteoarthritis, but would also be very likely pain post-surgery, for which we have another scientific board.
Thank you, René. Just a few words on the valuation of the biotech companies. You can see on this slide the typical valuation progression for a biotech like us. And as you can expect, for each clinical milestone that the company reaches, successfully reaches, I would add, there are huge boosts in valuation. And by the end of phase 2, the valuation is usually very high. It can usually reach the hundreds of millions of euros and even billions for the most successful companies. And at the end of the phase 2, that's usually when the exit of the early investors occurs.
It can also reach 0, of course, if the trials are unsuccessful.
Hopefully it won't. And another word on the licensing deal. Usually the deal is structured in different payment components. You have an upfront payment paid by the pharmaceutical partner right at the start of the deal, and then milestones payment when the product reaches the next development phases, and of course royalties on sales once the product gets market approval. A few words on the development of Peptinov and its funding status. We are quite proud to say that up until now, Peptinov was funded by grants, by R&D loans from the French government, by money from business angels, friends and family, and other business angels, from crowdfunding. And we haven't yet raised money from institutional biotech investors, but we raised money from a health insurance group called IRSEM, which has an interest in the treatment of osteoarthritis, and which holds currently about 10% of the equity of Peptinov. And so we are quite proud to have reached clinical phase 1 by our own means, I might say. And we will, during the next year or so, begin our fundraising phase with institutional biotech partners such as VC funds, pharma funds, and family offices.
I just want to add one word crowdfunding has been quite helpful to us. We've been helped by Happy Capital. We have two gentlemen on this call. They were there when we started in 2018 to start the funding phase for phase 1, and then they have been a good complement to every step in the way.
Thank you, René. We aggregated something like 800,000 euros, even a bit more.
Yes, as part of the 2.5 that were raised in the past couple of years. Let's go ahead.
And finally, just a few words on the capital ownership of Peptinov. Peptinov is right now mostly owned by its founder and management, in addition to a few business angels, the ones who are on the capital of Peptinov and the ones who contributed through the crowdfunding holding that we created. And about 10% of the company, as I said, is owned by IRSM Health Insurance Group.
Okay, we are coming to the very fast last part of the presentation. Just to say that because some of you already knew more or less what Peptinov is doing, I wanted just to focus on the past 12 months, what has happened. So we got the approval in May last year to do the clinical phase 1. Then we were able, despite the start of the COVID, to achieve our objective in terms of fundraising. It was €1 million last year. That was the target. We have reached 2 distinctions from European organizations, a gold status from the European Innovation and Technology Institute. And we have also received a seal of excellence from the European Innovation Council, and they gave us a score of 14.05 out of 15. So it means we do have some external recognition for what we do. The first patients we've mentioned before have been injected this month in March. And then we have extended the product potential in 2 ways. First, the anti-IL-6 product itself. Now we've seen in the slides of Hervé that there are applications in multiple areas. And as I said, we would like to have at least 2 phase 2 clinical trials in osteoarthritis and in post-op pain. But then we have also started looking at other fields than the IL-6 proteins, so other protein targets. And we are looking and starting tests in animal for proteins involved in animal inflammation, because cats and dogs and horses do have osteoarthritis as well, but it's not the same protein as humans. And then we have started also looking at certain protein involved in the development of cancers. So we are at the mouse trial stage, but we have some potential leads which start showing up. And the final thing, you will hear more and more doctors mention an unmet medical need, which is chronic low-grade inflammation. It's like a normal inflammation, except that it is low grade. It's only a small multiplier of the normal levels of inflammatory proteins. And as you can see in the figure on the right, you have many disease areas which are linked to that chronic low-grade inflammation. And it so happens that the quantities of antibodies that Peptinov is able to generate, at least in monkeys, we have to confirm in humans, seem to correlate well with the level of IL-6 proteins that can be seen in a chronic low-grade inflammation. So it's early days, but that's another lead for us that could prove quite a remarkable potential going forward. I'll finish off by mentioning the people. This is only the IL-6 project team. So again, I would like to emphasize the complementary nature. So we have a solid team, but very complementary. There are 3 people around this call. So apart from Hervé and myself, Jean-François Zagury, middle left, the founder of Peptinov, is also attending. He's the one who recruited me as a CEO. I'm very grateful to him, and also he gave me through multiple presentations the basics of immunotherapy. So then we are supported also by 2 boards. a medical and scientific board which has key opinion leaders, very high international reputation in osteoarthritis. If I just take the top left one, Professor Berenbaum, he has been heading the International Society for Research on Osteoarthritis. And then we have a strategic board which meets every 2 months, headed by an expert in investment banking and innovation funding. And then in this board, we also have the CEO of the health insurance group, which is owning 10% of the company, and by another gentleman who was until June last year the chairman of the French subsidiary of a Japanese pharmaceutical company and has created several biotechs. So as you see, we do have a muscle behind us, not just for the show, but really to advise us as we test new ideas. So this is my conclusion. We have a very, very high ambition we would like, if we could, to change the therapeutic field, but we have to remain very modest. We are just at the start of the journey in humans, a very exciting journey. We think that we have the means to succeed. I won't go back to the different points. And if the results of our clinical trials are successful, then our products could potentially change the game. But time will tell. I think that's enough talking. Let us take any questions. I believe, Antoine, that you have some which have started already in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, René. Yeah, thank you for this presentation. Just a few words of introduction. So we are sustaining Peptinov since 3 years now. We fundraised with you twice already. We are a crowdfunding platform regulated by the French Market Authority, and we are very proud to sustain your project, not only because of the quality of the team, but also because of the impact on the mankind that could have such a drug candidate if it works, for sure. So my name is Antoine Dubas. I am a managing partner of the platform Happy Capital that you can find at the address www.happy, like happy in English, capital.com. Now I introduce my colleague Maël, which is gonna repeat the question and ask you the question in order to answer them. And please, if you have any other question, do not hesitate to write it. We will proceed and we will treat all the questions. And, thank you again, René and Hervé. Maël, I let you introduce yourself.
Okay, René, I'm not gonna. We're gonna proceed to the Q&A. So we have first question from Swapnil. He asks if the therapy have benefits for someone who has undergone both knee replacement surgery.
So if someone has undergone knee replacement for both knees, theoretically, no. However, if pain is still there, and of course, if there is osteoarthritis in other parts of the body than just the knees, then the therapy could have a potential benefit, yes.
Okay, thank you. We're going to proceed to the next question with Mr. Gilles, who asks if there are specific areas of the body that are more sensitive to osteoarthritis, or if the diseases just spread all over the body, all over the joints, actually.
In fact, potentially most joints, but you can see again the slides. So you have the very prevailing areas are knee, hip, hand, the spine, the shoulder, and then the wrists, and or fingers. These are the main areas. Okay, the response is it doesn't. In fact, what we are doing is we are reducing the quantities of circulating IL-6 in order to go back to good levels. The chronic inflammation results from an increase in inflammatory proteins, let's say twofold or fourfold increase. So what we do is to generate enough antibodies to return to the basic level of IL-6 in the circulation, as opposed to the excess level. Now, to be fully transparent, we have only done trial in animals so far. Now we are just starting in humans. So one of the outcome of the phase 1 clinical trial will be to measure the quantities of antibodies produced by humans. Will they be similar to monkeys? And also, will there be variations in the quantities of antibodies generated? There is also a question mark on which dose of the product is best. We are testing 2 doses as part of the clinical trial. So we really need to see the outcome, which will only be in middle of next year when we do receive the results of the trial, that we will see what dose is best for neutralization purposes. Yes, so there is the same product could theoretically be used in autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis. The reason why we haven't started with those is because there are existing treatments to rheumatoid arthritis, and we were advised that for especially to raise funds, that it could be difficult as a starting point to say we are going to be a Me Too product potentially in these other diseases. So they advise us to go into an area with no cure. But the answer is clearly yes. IL-6 is seen in multiple autoimmune diseases, and they can be targets for us in the future. We are actually talking to another group of people, to a professor expert in rare diseases, about the possibility of conducting a trial, but that would only be probably in early 2023, a trial in a rare disease associated with autoimmunity. Okay, so in fact, there are 2 types of feedback. We are going to receive, and we are receiving already, regular feedback from the patients who are going through the clinical trial. Feedback meaning they are being contacted by the hospital every now and then they have 10 visits during over 6 months to check their status. We know that the first couple of patients, the one that received their injection in March, they are both doing very well. One of them, I know him personally, and we spoke yesterday. But it's only a start, but that we will know on an ongoing basis. What we will not know is until the end of the trial is first of all who has received the product versus who has received placebo. That's because of the constraints of the double-blind trial. The other thing that we won't know until the very end is what is the quantities, the levels of antibodies that are produced by each patient. So we will have all that information, but only at the end of the trial in 16 months from now. Is it available in the UK? Well, right now the trial takes place in our hospital here in France. We haven't yet contracted for the phase 2. We believe we might conduct it in Denmark because it's very convenient to recruit a patient there, and it's a very well recognized country for rheumatoid pathologies. But could it be in the UK at the same time? Yes, that's possible. Then the final part of your question, when it will be commercially available, well, we have to go through all 3 phases of clinical trial. Peptinov will conduct phase 1 and phase 2. Then normally we would sell a product license at the end of phase 2 for a big pharma company to conduct the phase 3. So I would say, if we are extremely optimistic, which we probably should be more conservative than extremely optimistic, I don't see, unfortunately, a commercialization before 2025, 6 at the earliest. So we didn't see any side effects. What was done, the goal of the trial in monkey, first of all, was to test the tolerance. That is a product well tolerated by monkeys? We injected 3 doses, the maximum one being 10 times higher than the one used in humans. And there was no side effects. It's only with the highest dose, the one 10 times higher than in humans, that at the injection sites, there were some local cutaneous stuff. Abscesses, which were benign and, and did not occur when using the other doses. Usually the process of pain starts before cartilage destruction. So and that was not known before. Before people were thinking that you experience pain because the cartilage is destroyed, therefore bone rubs against bone and you suffer. But in fact, the inflammation starts before and starts generating pain even before you have a narrowing of the cartilage in your joints. So as long as you have a signal, and pain is the best one, then you can not only see a doctor who will say you might be having a starting osteoarthritis, but also you can objectivize that inflammation through X-rays or MRI, where you can it's easily detected that there is an inflammation. But you are right. Our main target would be, I wouldn't say starting osteoarthritis necessarily, but at least not reaching the very late stages where only surgery can do something for you. So there has to be some cartilage left for the therapy to be worth it. So whereby you stop inflammation, and then that should stop cartilage destruction. Our expectation, let's talk about the current plan, is to do this current round. We are raising 2.5 million euros in order to take us up to the end of phase 1 and the start of phase 2. So let's say until late 2022 with the current funding. Then we will be doing the large phase 2 raise, which will be in the 20 million range. And normally that would be enough. But if we are good enough, we will not target only 20, we will go higher, maybe to a 25, 30 range, so that we can do, as I said before, more than one phase 2 clinical trials. So the complete answer to your question is, if we raise enough in phase 2 to do multiple phase 2 trials, then theoretically we don't need any more money. If we raise, let's say, a more moderate amount of money in the 15 million range, and we only concentrate on osteoarthritis for the phase 2, then there will be the possibility that at the end of that phase 2, we sell a license to a pharma company for osteoarthritis, but we continue the trials for the product testing in other areas, in which case we might do other raises, but more likely we will be using part of the proceeds from the first sale. Normally, I was about to let Hervé answer, but I think it's very difficult to ask a CFO to anticipate what the valuation could be. Whatever figure I give, he will say it's 10 times higher than what I should have said. So let me start. So a year ago, our value was 14 million euros, 1.4. Now that we have started phase 1, we are worth 18 million, 1.8. We think that at the end of, you saw the multipliers. So if phase 1 and phase 2 are both successful, my expectation is that the company will be worth several hundred million euros. I don't want to qualify several. My hope is to do more than 10 of that is exceeding the billion euro values. But frankly, I can say anything until we've done the trial. It's difficult. But surely, if we succeed in blocking osteoarthritis as part of phase 2 trials, let alone if we have prospects in what I showed in other areas like chronic low-grade inflammation or pain post-surgery, then I have the belief that we could achieve a license deal, which would be very expensive. But again, time will tell. Hervé, do you want to moderate what I've said?
No, that's okay. Nothing to add.
I would say we have three categories of targets today. And this is done, with the drive of our strategic board. Number 1 is osteoarthritis. Number 2, which we would like to do in parallel, is pain post-surgery, because today you have 25% of surgeries, especially knee surgery, where people experience pain several months and sometimes years after surgery. So we have a trial which has been designed, which we would like to do as a phase 2 trial, whereby we would immunize with our product the people before their surgery with the hope that they would not experience pain post-surgery. So that's the number 2 target. And then we have a third and final category I mentioned before in one of the other answers. That's rare diseases, which are of an inflammatory nature. There is one benefit in rare diseases is that it's usually easy to find patients because often the poor people do not have a choice, so they are willing to participate in trials. But also from an investor standpoint and a pharmaceutical company standpoint, if a company like us is efficient in a rare disease, the benefit is that you can get approval to be on the market, to have a temporary utilization right, even before you complete the clinical trials. In other words, a pharmaceutical company could potentially commercialize the product in the rare disease sooner than the end of the clinical trials. So we were advised, therefore, to position ourselves also in rare diseases. And as I mentioned in my reply to Colm, if we raise enough money for phase 2 funding, then we will simultaneously go after osteoarthritis, chronic pain post-surgery, and a range of rare diseases. The first thing I'd say is I hate to regard as competitors people who try to develop treatment in a disease affecting 250 million people with no cure. I think this is large enough for multiple types of therapies to be attempted. So we are the only one which is attempting that inflammation route by blocking the IL-6 protein. There are other companies. So there are all biotechs who are injecting some stuff in the cartilage, in the joints, with the hope to stimulate the reconstitution of the cartilage. Others which are stopping the aging of the cells in the knee with the hope that by blocking these aging cells, they would block the cartilage destruction. So I could continue. There are probably 4 or 5 of them. I really don't regard them as competitors, but they are alternatives. And what I think the future could show is that you have strategies which work with certain types of patients. Jürgen rightly mentioned, in our case, we are targeting the earlier, the better. But then you have other therapies which are more alternatives to surgery. So you can maybe postpone knee surgery by several years, assuming that their cell therapies work. So I think there are different strategies, and different results will be seen during clinical trials. I'm hoping that there is enough room for everybody, but there is no single company that I would regard as the competitor with a big C today. I'm not going to be very original. My belief is the number one strength is the team. The fact that we have such a variety of profiles. The founder, he's on the call, so I don't want him to shy away. But he's a kind of a mini genius by inventing the platform for people to generate antibodies against their own proteins. But because he's very bright, he thought that he should be surrounded by people different from him, which would be maybe focused on other areas. So we have a 64-year-old expert. That doesn't sound very startup, right? But he's great in clinical development. He has experience in doing clinical development and an expertise in vaccines, which is very, very good. And the good thing is, from time to time, we do have confrontations of views around the table. Discussions can become very heated. But in the end, again, there is a mutual respect, which means that we always end up somewhere. And as a CEO, my learning is that the more diverse the team, the better it is. So I think that's the number one strength. If you really want to have a second one, I think it's, again, the ability to cause the body of the patient to generate antibodies without reaching what is called autoimmunity. Because you don't want to disturb your immune system to the extent that it will permanently block the IL-6 protein. We do need the IL-6 protein, but in normal quantities. So we are only trying to return to the normal baseline levels as opposed to the pathological increase. Yeah, I would like to really thank you for your questions, for staying that long. Again, I'm very, very pleased to see the names of people and the curiosity. So thanks for attending, and I hope that you find it of interest. Take care, everyone, and see you soon.